In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to create profile models and profiles for drainage networks and how to use them for reviewing and editing. First, I'm going to check my calculation type, go into my options, making sure that my calculation type is set to analysis. I don't want to make any changes, but I do want to update the calculations so I can update my hydraulic grade line so they'll have the latest on the profiles. So I'll go ahead and calculate the network. That looks fine. Okay. The next thing I want to do is set my feature definition. Whenever you create a profile, the software creates a horizontal alignment along that profile, and it needs a feature definition for that horizontal alignment. So I'll go ahead and set that now. It's easier to do it this way and go ahead and use set the toggle for use feature definitions, because in the tool that I'm going to use, these profile runs tool, they do not loop. So you have to execute this tool again and again and again. And every time it's going to ask you for a feature definition for an alignment unless you set it up here. All right, so let's go ahead and create my profile runs in drainage and utilities. It's not like horizontal alignments. There is a special suite of tools that you need to use to create your profiles. They will then appear in your Explorer, and then you can then open up profile models to look at those profiles. So first step is to create the profiles and then open the profile models. So I'm going to go ahead and create profiles for all the branches in my system. I have 4 submodels in here. There's an outfall here, and then an outfall on both sides of the stream here. So I'm going to use hydraulic runs to outfall. I could use hydraulic runs from node, which will run a profile from a node to another node or to its outfall. Utility run, I could create a profile from a series of links. But this is my favorite, hydraulic runs to outfall. You simply select the outfall and it will create profiles for all branches of that network. So I'll select that. And you can see here under feature definition, it simply says use active feature definition, which I've already set. I want to go in a profile direction from up to down, and I'm going to select box as my node draw type for the profiles. So the prompt is to select the outfall. This system ends at a cross section that's been set up as an outfall node, so I'll select that outfall. And you can see that it gives you a preview of what it's going to, the profile that's going to create. So I need to click to accept that. I go to my Explorer now. I can see that that profile now appears in my list of profile runs. Also notice that I now have a horizontal alignment that's been created. In working with drainage utility elements, this can be a bit annoying having this alignment there. Often I want to select a pipe and it will select the alignment instead. So as a practice, I just will activate that window and turn off that level, which is drainage baseline. All right. So I'm going to do that for all of my systems here. Select the outfall node, accept. Go to the last 2 here. Again, see, you have to go to the tool to initiate it. Select the outfall. Now you can see all branches are going to be profiled. Click to accept. Last one more time. And there's the network that will be profiled. Accept. All right, all profiles have been created. If I go to my Explorer, there they all are. Now when I'm working with profiles, editing a system, I like to have the profile model open, and I like to have my utility properties pinned out and set to the drainage tab. So how do I create a profile model? I go to my Explorer. I find the one that I want to look at. In this case, I'm going to pick my largest trunk line, that one right there. Right click on it and open profile model. Select this window, and there is the profile. Before I start doing editing in my profiles, there's something I'd like to check. Go to Analysis, Flex Tables. I have set up a table called Settings, Pipe Settings. And this has a number of toggles for me to check. By default, the Set Invert to Start toggle has been enabled for all of the pipes. And what this does is it locks the upstream invert of the pipe to the upstream node. And that kind of makes sense when you're doing automatic design. You do want your downstream pipe to be the same invert as your upstream node. However, that becomes a problem when you want to do editing in profiles. It's easier to do editing in profiles if you turn those switches off. So I'm going to right click on that column heading, select global edit, and then leave that unchecked to turn off that toggle for all of the pipes. Okay. So let's look at editing. I'm going to select this pipe. When I select it, I can see the properties here. Close some of these tabs I don't really need to look at. This is what I'm mostly interested in. When I select this, I want my user preferences at this point to be set to use construction length and slope. I want that to be false. Come back to that a little bit later. All right, when I select a pipe, what you see immediately is I have the typical open roads manipulators. I've got drag handle at the center. I've got drag handles on either end. I also have invert text that I can change. I have slope text that I can also change. So to edit the upstream and downstream pipe inverts, you have a couple choices. I can simply grab a node, a drag handle, and change it that way. I can grab by the way, you can see that I've got a vertical alignment in here as well. I usually turn that level off. It's the same level. So I could change the upstream invert by drag handle. I can also select the text and key in a specific invert. When I do that, it only changes the upstream end. It keeps the downstream end locked. And I can do the same thing on the downstream end. I can key in an invert, or I can use the drag handle. So it's very simple to change your pipe inverts in a profile. You may have noticed that when you change if you lower the upstream invert so that it's below the elevation of the upstream node, automatically the software lowers the elevation of that node to match that lower outgoing pipe. If I want to edit the node inverts, I have the same option here. I have a drag handle that I can move the bottom up and down just by clicking and dragging. I can also select the text key in a value. If I end up with a situation like this, I've raised my upstream pipe invert up, and now my node invert is too low. It's very simple to just drag it, and bring it up, it will notice that it will allow you to lower the node elevation, the node invert elevation below the upstream end of the pipe, but it won't allow you to raise the node invert elevation above the invert of the outgoing pipe. So you can just do a click and drag and bring that up. And so it's very easy to do these kind of edits. What about pipe slope? You can see I've got slope manipulators on either end. I could enter in a slope, and it depends what happens depends on which slope I choose. If I pick the upstream slope and I change that one, then the upstream invert will change and the downstream invert will remain locked. Same with the downstream invert. If I pick the slope on the downstream side, then the upstream invert remains locked and the downstream invert is adjusted. If I want to raise or lower the pipe and maintain the slope, there is a drag handle in the middle that I can use to do that. Notice that the displayed slope values are positive, but when you enter value, you have to enter in a negative value because it's going down. Also notice that there are two versions of the slope. When I select that pipe, if I go to my utility properties, I've got a construction slope, which I just entered in, and I have a calculated slope. The calculated slope is a center to center slope, and the construction slope is wall to wall. That's why the calculated slope is always going to be a little bit less than the construction slope. What is displayed here when you select the pipe is the calculated slope, the center to center slope. What you enter is the construction slope. So I entered a 2% slope and it's showing me a calculated slope of 1.97%. Now, if it really bothers you that that's inconsistent, you can go back to that setting that I changed earlier. It's a user preference. Under View Option Civil, and the option Use Construction Length and Slope, change that to True. And now when you select the pipe, it will display the construction slope. And it also shows you in the also shows you in the utility properties dialog that the calculated slope has now been made equal to the construction slope. However, the price you pay for that is that the slope is now shown in the center only and it is not editable. So you can no longer edit the slope in Profile. You would have to come back here and change the slope in your utility properties dialog. So I'm not crazy about that. I like having those options to be able to edit the slope in the profile. So I typically leave this toggle as false. And then in my utility properties, I can see both values. What about editing a pipe's properties such as pipe material or size? You would do that by selecting the pipe in the profile and then coming to your utility properties, and that's the one you want to change right there. I'll change that 15 to a 24 so you can see the change. Update. There it is. So it is updated in the profile, and it is also updating the utility properties. And if I go to the ORD properties, it changes right there as well. So do make those changes in the utility properties. Don't make them here in the ORD properties. Make them here. You should see in your profile when you have incoming pipes from a branch, you should see these ovals. If you do not see those ovals, go to your user preferences under View Option Civil, and there is a toggle. It says Show Connected Conduits and Profiles, so that should always be set to true because you always want to see those ovals. That's important. Notice when those ovals are selectable, I can hover my mouse and get my ORD attributes. It's telling me that that's pipe P14. I can select that oval and look at its properties. I've made a lot of changes here. I'm going to go ahead and change this back to 15 and make these inverts make a little bit more sense. This is a very steep pipe. For a last pipe, I don't really want something that steep. I'm going to put in a minus 0.5% slope. You can see the node drops down automatically. I'm going to go ahead and fix this node. Okay, that looks pretty reasonable. Notice my hydraulic grade line has not updated. To get an updated hydraulic grade line, I need to recompute the network. So I'll do that, and you can see the hydraulic grade line will update once the calculations are done. There it is. There's the updated hydraulic grade line. Very rigorous analysis. The hydraulics for partial flow hydraulics is very good. You can see. Got a drawdown from critical depth here. Because of the energy losses in the structure, I've now got a hydraulic jump. Here's the drawdown again from critical depth to supercritical flow, hitting a hydraulic jump. So the analysis of the hydraulic grade line is very robust. The last thing I want to talk about are 3D cuts. When you look at a cross-section view, a cross-section model, you automatically get everything that's in the 3D model and anything referenced to the 3D model. That's not the case with profiles. The only thing that the profile will show you is the active terrain. I didn't say that before, but before you create profiles, make sure you set your terrain, the terrain that you want to see in the profile, make sure that you set that active. So the terrain here is a terrain that was built from the proposed roadway corridor model. So that's what I'm seeing here. I'd also like to see existing terrain. I'd also like to see my pavement depth from the roadway corridor model. I'd also like to see existing utilities. All of that stuff is in the 3D model. So to see that, there's a tool here called Create 3D Cut. You have to select your method, which is the full profile or corners. I like to use corners, so I'll choose that method, and I just have to identify my corners. So I'll pick my corners. And now I can see my existing ground. I'm seeing existing utilities here. I have a utility conflict. Here's another utility that's deep. What I'm not seeing is I expected to see my pavement layers from my roadway corridor model. So let me go and take a look at my level display for the referenced corridor model, corridor main road. And sure enough, I've got some levels that are turned off. I just need to turn them on and refresh my 3D cut. And there's my pavement box. You can see the upstream end of my pipe is into my pavement box. So I probably want to lower this pipe to avoid the pavement box as well as get below that water line. So on the subject of 3D cuts, 3D cuts are not dynamic. They don't automatically update when there is a change to your 3D model. I can demonstrate that by selecting a pipe, making a change to it. Now you can see there's a remnant. This is from the 3D model. This pipe, is modeled in a 3D model. And so that's the old location. And this is the new location. So to update it, I need to go to refresh 3D cut. And now the 3D is then updated. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the profile node display. So you can see how accurate the 3D model depiction of these inlets actually is. You can see the footing, the grate in there. This is a pretty high exaggeration here. I'm going to adjust the exaggeration from 10 to 5. And that looks a little more reasonable. Here's the head wall on top of the pipe and the footing. Looks like I need to make an adjustment there. There's a mismatch. So 3D cuts are editable. You can select it. And then the manipulator, when it turns red, you can adjust the window. In terms of some things that control the display of the 3D cut, this element here, the 3D cut, is put on level default. Okay, so that level needs to be on. Constructions also needs to be enabled in that view. Okay, so to see that, just go to your view attributes in your profile window and make sure that constructions is turned on. If that's not on, then you won't be able to see the 3D cut window. So defaults have to be on, the defaults level and the construction level has to be on. Some other settings important to 3D cuts. Go to your references dialog. And there is a variable called visible edges. Right now it's set to disconnected cache. That should be set to cache sync mode manual. So you want your visible edges to be set to cached and cache sync set to manual. In my experience, it tends to work better that way. You can see that it's now red. If it's red like that, you can right click on it and say reload, and I'll recut the 3D cut. Now it's not red. Do not delete your 3D cut window once it is created. Sometimes that will work and sometimes it won't. And if you delete it, sometimes the 3D cut elements are still there. And once that happens, there's really no going back. You have to go to your Explorer, find that profile and delete it and recreate it from scratch. So once you create the 3D cut, do not delete it. If you don't want to see the 3D cut information anymore, the simplest thing to do is just to go to your references and turn off display of your 3D model, and then you won't see it. All right, that is it for profiles. Hope you've enjoyed this video, and I wish you the best as you use OpenRoads.